slaves drag me along the ground and lay me out at full length, after stripping me of all my clothes. And when the slaves had so sat upon me that I could not move, he fetched in a rod of Keen's tree and came down with it upon my body, and continued beating me on the back and sides till I lost consciousness from excess of pain, and I despaired of life. Then he commanded the slaves to take me away as soon as it was dark, together with the old woman to show them the way, and throw me upon the floor of the house wherein I dwelt before my marriage. They did their Lord's bidding, and cast me down in my old home, and went their ways. I did not revive from my swoon till dawn appeared, when I applied myself to the dressing of my wounds with ointments and other medicaments. And I medicined myself, but my sides and ribs still showed signs of the rod, as thou hast seen. I lay in weakly case and confined to my bed for 4 months before I was able to rise, and health returned to me. At the end of that time I went to the house where all this had happened, and found it a ruin. The street had been pulled down in long, and rubbish heaps rose where the building was. Nor could I learn how this had come about. Then I betook myself to this my sister on my father's side, and found her with these 2 black dogs. I saluted her and told her what had betided me and the whole of my story, and she said, "O my sister, who is safe from thee despite of time and secure, thanks be to Allah who has brought thee off safely." And she began to say, "Such is the world, so bear a patient heart, when riches leave thee, and when friends depart." Then she told me her own story, and what had happened to her with her 2 sisters, and how matters had ended. So we abode together, and the subject of marriage was never on our tongues for all these years. After a while we were joined by our other sister, who goeth out every morning, and buyeth all we require for the day and night. And we continued in such condition till this last night. In the morning our sister went out as usual to make our market, and then befell us what befell from bringing the porter into the house, and admitting these 3 Calendar men. We entreated them kindly and honorably, and a quarter of the night had not passed ere 3 grave and respectable merchants joined us and told us their adventures. We sat talking with them, but on one condition which they violated, whereupon we treated them as sorted with their breach of promise, and made them repeat the account they had given of themselves. They did our bidding, and we forgave their offense. So they departed from us, and this morning we were unexpectedly summoned to thy presence. And such is our story. The Caliph wondered at her words, and bade the tale be recorded and chronicled, and laid up in his chambers. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 19th night, she continued, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Caliph commanded this story, and sisters dealt with her and felt myself bound to avenge her on them. At first I was minded to slay them, but I feared it would be grievous to her, so I transformed them to dogs. But if thou desire their release, O Commander of the Faithful, I will release them to pleasure thee and her, for I am of the Moslems. Quoth the Caliph, release them, and after we will look into the affair of the beaten lady and consider her case carefully. And if the truth of her story be evidenced, I will exact retaliation from him who wronged her. Said the Ifritah, O Commander of the Faithful, I will forthwith release them, and will discover to thee the man who did that deed by this lady, and wronged her, and took her property, and he is the nearest of all men to thee. So saying, she took a cup of water, and muttered a spell over it, and uttered words that were no understanding. Then she sprinkled some of the water over the faces of the two dogs, saying, return to your former human shape, whereupon they were restored to their natural forms, and fell to praising their Creator. Then said the Ifritah, O Commander of the Faithful, of a truth he who scourged this lady with rods is thy son Al-Amin, brother of Al-Mamun, for he had heard of her beauty and loveliness, and he played a lover's stratagem with her, and married her according to the law, and committed the crime such as it is of scourging her. Yet indeed he is not to be blamed for beating her, for he laid a condition on her, and swore her by a solemn oath not to do a certain thing. However, she was false to her vow, and he was minded to put her to death. But he feared Almighty Allah, and contented himself with scourging her, as thou hast seen, and with sending her back to her own place. Such is the story of the second lady, and the Lord knoweth all. When the Caliph heard these words of the Ifritah, and knew who had beaten the damsel, he marveled with exceeding marvel, and said, praise be to Allah the Most High, the Almighty, who hath shown his exceeding mercy towards me, enabling me to deliver these two damsels from sorcery and torture, and vouchsafing to let me know the secret of this lady's history. And now, by Allah, we will do a deed which shall be recorded of us after we are no more. Then he summoned his son Al-Amin, and questioned him of the story of the second lady, the Portress, and he told it in the face of truth. Whereupon the Caliph bade call into presence the witnesses, and the three calendars, and the first lady with her sister's german who had been ensorcelled. And he married the three to the three calendars whom he knew to be princes and sons of kings, and he appointed them chamberlains about his person, assigning to them stipends and allowances and all that they required, and lodging them in his palace at Baghdad. He returned the beaten lady to his son Al-Amin, renewing the marriage contract between them, and gave her great wealth, and bade rebuild the house fairer than it was before. As for himself, he took to wife the third sister, and lay with her that night. The next day he set apart for her an apartment, with handmaidens for her service, and a fixed daily allowance. And the people marveled at their Caliph's generosity and princely wisdom, nor did he forget to send all these histories to be recorded in his annual records. When Shahrazad ceased speaking, Dunyazad exclaimed, O my own sister, So she